friends, and welcome back to our English Literature Corner. So today we're going to talk about theater. You have asked me to talk about theater, and today we're going to analyze the works of one of the most representative playwrights in we can say in the modern literature, and I'm talking about Samuel Beckett. So Samuel Beckett can be considered actually probably the major figure, one of the major figures in the modern European drama. He wasn't English, okay, as many other important writers whose works are now studied in English literature. Beckett was also an Irish man, but you can say that he spent most of his life as an expatriate. He was born in 1906 in Dublin, so in Ireland, obviously, into a Protestant middle-class family. But in spite of the education he received, that was quite strict, he lost his faith step by step, and we can actually recognize that aspect in the message that he conveys in his works. After graduation, after graduating at Trinity College in Dublin, he traveled a lot, and he went to Paris at first, where he met Joyce, and the two became friends. They had a lot in common, actually. Joyce was also an Irishman, also born in Dublin, and Joyce was obviously one of the most important writers belonging to modernism, and his experimentation, his experimental works actually changed literature forever. So Beckett wrote also an essay about Joyce, and the two became friends, and every time Beckett came back to Paris in his life, he went and met Joyce again. So he was sort of a very recurring point, okay, in his life. But as I said before, he traveled a lot. He traveled to England, France in general, in Germany. But then during the Second World War, he settled in Paris, and he joined the French resistance against the Germans, obviously. And after the liberation, so in 1945, he started probably his most productive period. And during this period, he wrote his two masterpieces, so Waiting for Godot, which was in French at first, okay, he wrote in French in this period, okay, then it was translated later, so the title wasn't Waiting for Godot, at first it was En attendant Godot. And the other great play he wrote, a drama he wrote, that was Endgame, and then also a trilogy in prosa and some short stories that were then translated also into English. Well, Godot was an immediate success. It was an international success, and he was awarded of the Nobel Prize in 1969 because of this great work. Then he wrote also other plays, later plays, and in those plays he emphasized his desire to disaggregate the traditional structure of drama, of theater, and we can say that he sort of denied the interaction among characters. That was basically the focus point of a drama, okay, so characterization and interaction amongst characters was obviously the most important aspect of work in theater. But he tried to deny that and to change completely the way of expressing, okay, a message in theater and through theater. His plays had most of the times just one actor, and there was just a little movement, almost no movement at all, no plot, no, we can say it wasn't dynamic, and even words became less and less, and silence pauses were one of the most important ways to convey emotions and also to convey ideas. Well, let's go back to his two masterpieces and we'll analyze them quite quickly. So first of all, Waiting for Godot, or En attendant Godot, as you prefer, that's a great metaphor of human existence, okay, of life in general. It's all about how to get through life, okay? How the human being can actually get through life. And the answer is quite easy, but it is also quite pessimistic. It is just by force of habit, okay? It's the only way to go through life is to go on in spite of boredom, in spite of hopelessness, in spite of suffering, okay? Life is aimless, there is no final aim, and there are no actual ideals. The protagonists, who are, they are two tramps, okay? Their names are Vladimir and Astrigan, and the fact that they are tramps, living, okay, waiting, okay, on a country road for someone, for Godot, and that Godot is, we can say, the Deus ex machina, okay, that's obviously it's Latin, okay, Deus ex machina means someone who arrives and solves all their problems, and someone who can give them a solution to their problems, a key to their life, a final aim, or whatever. That Godot will never arrive. And as I was saying before, the fact that they are two tramps, okay, on a country road, that country road is obviously life, okay, and it is quite empty, it is quite desolated, and they are just tramps. They have no, they have nothing, and they have nowhere to go to. So they're kind of lost, okay, they're tramps in life, not just on a country road, waiting for this Godot, as we said before. This Godot, so this Deus ex machina, this entity that arrives and solves things, doesn't exist, okay? And it can be considered or interpreted from a religious point of view. It could be God, or from a philosophical point of view or social point of view, okay? So it can represent everything that could actually give human being a solution, okay, to their life, or anyway a final aim. There is also an interpretation about the name Godot. The first part, God, obviously God, divinity, and the second part, Dot, okay, is the word, the German word Tod, which means death, okay, written in a reversed way, so as if it was a scene in the mirror, okay, so the other way around. So that's the death, God's death, we can say so, but it's not actually a religious meaning. It's more like well, the representation of the lack of divinity, the lack of a meaning, the lack of an ideal, the lack of an aim, okay? That's the general meaning of that name. So, if this Godot doesn't arrive, then what will they do? How will they actually go through life? They just live of repetitive rituals. They are quite meaningless, but those rituals are everything in their lives. They are absolutely necessary, okay, to live. And these rituals belong to our lives, belong to our society, okay, belong to our religions, and we want them to have an important meaning because we hang on to them, okay. But actually, the truth is, in Beckett's opinion, that they don't have a meaning, they don't have a value at all, okay, and they are just necessary for us, okay, to go on, okay. They are our only way to go on through life. Well, another metaphor of life, completely different on one side but similar in the final meaning, is in the other work, Endgame. In this case, the environment is different. It's not outside anymore, but it is inside. It is a bare room, empty, okay. In this room, there are the four protagonists, and they have no communication with the outside world. The outside world is not described. It's not seen, but it is perceived as a very empty space. So the room, the bare room, which is actually quite sad, it is like a sort of a prison, is life, obviously. But the outside, so everything that is outside life, is completely empty, is like nothing, okay, there is nothing over there. So the four protagonists, the four characters live there in this room together, and they are connected with each other. Well, two of them are connected by a relationship of servant and master, and the other two by another kind of relationship, which is father and son. And we can say that they have a very random behavior. It's not coherent. Their only concern, the proper concern, is about eating and surviving, actually. There is no actual plot, there is no actual story, there isn't a dynamic narration. There is also, we can see that the chronological time is quite meaningless. So it's basically very, very static, and there is no progression in the story. There is only repetition, which is a way to emphasize what we said before also in Waiting for Godot, so the lack of meaning, okay, the ritual for surviving, okay, which are obviously meaningless, but they are necessary to live, to survive, to go through life. We can say that in general the main emotion that is conveyed is indifference. There is also irritation, there is also hatred at times. There is also suffering. It is mentioned in a dialogue, even if it isn't displayed clearly. But probably the most important feeling is boredom, once again, as in Waiting for Godot. The language is obviously quite informal, but as I said before, dialogues as well as behaviors are quite are not coherent and are not really constructed. The general idea is that we receive a very grim and pessimistic view of life in this claustrophobic interior that is actually a shelter, okay, a shelter that our characters need, but as I said before, it is also a jail, it is also a prison for them. while they wait for the final, let's say the final solution, that is the end game, and obviously it is death. Well, we can say that with these two plays, so Waiting for Godot, or Anatole Godot as you prefer, and Endgame in the 50s, Beckett can actually, he became, the most representative writer of the so-called theater of the absurd. The theater of the absurd was settled in Paris, and the main characteristics of this theater were that, first of all, there was no social context. That's very important, because social context, characterization, and interaction amongst characters, as we said before, were amongst the most important elements of a play. Now there is no social context, but a sort of a we have a sort of a world of dreams and nightmares in which time and actions and words are perceived in a different way, and it's absolutely not realistic. It's quite random. They are obviously a representation of the subconscious mind, basically. We can say that Beckett, and in general the theater of the absurd, abandons the ideal of the depth and the realism of characterization. That's not important anymore, because they believe that a play could express ideas and convey messages through moods, through emotions, through imagery that could actually evoke something in the audience. Okay. Well, that's basically the idea of the theater of the absurd, that actually disgregates, as I said before, the structure, the traditional structure of theater. But there is an aspect that is often ignored, and it is quite important. Well, the final aim of the theater of the absurd wasn't just to disgregate, to eliminate elements, okay, and to give a sort of an empty work to express emptiness. No, there was a structure inside this deconstructed work. And there is an author, we can say a drama specialist, whose name is Martin Esslin, who wrote a lot about Samuel Beckett, and specifically in this work, The Theatre of the Absurd, that was written in 1972. He wrote these few lines, and I'd like to read them with you and to analyze them quite briefly, in order to emphasize, to focus on an aspect that is often forgotten, but it's very, very important, and it concerns the theatre of the absurd. Beckett specifically, but the theatre of the absurd in general. Martin Esslin says Beckett's plays can be interpreted on many levels. Alright. Endgame may well be a monodrama on one level, and a morality play about the death of a rich man on another. Okay, so there can be different interpretation, and we can classify also the works in different ways. But the peculiar psychological reality of Beckett's characters has often been noticed. That's important. So let's focus for a moment not on the general message of the work, but specifically on the psychological analysis of the characters. Because we said there was no depth in characterization. This is true. But on the other side, these characters represent something else from a psychological point of view. Pozzo and Lucky, their two characters belonging to Waiting for Godot, have been interpreted as body and mind. Body and mind. They are obviously two complementary parts. Okay? Vladimir and Astragon, the two tramps, the two protagonists Waiting for Godot, have been seen as so complementary that they might be the two halves of a single personality. Okay, that's important. Okay, the two tramps are so complementary that we consider them two sides of the same coin. The conscious and the subconscious mind. Okay, so that two halves, okay, two parts are the conscious side and the subconscious side. Obviously, they're also complementary, and together they can create a whole. They can actually be divided. Each of these three pairs, he mentioned three pairs, well, the first one, Pozzo and Lucky, the second one is Vladimir and Astragon, and now he mentioned the third one, which is Ham and Clove. They are two protagonists of Endgame, and they are connected by the relationship of servant-master, as I said before. So these three couples, okay, examples of what he's saying, each of these three pairs is linked by a relationship of mutual interdependence. Okay, so they are interdependent. They depend on each other. They can't be actually divided. Wanting to leave each other, at war with each other, and yet depending on each other. So they are always wanting to go away and to leave the other side. They only fight each other, but at the same time they depend on each other, and so they can't be split. Okay? Nec tecum, nec sine te. This is Latin, okay? It means it's not possible to be with you, neither with you nor without you, okay? This is something that we tend to see when we talk about romantic couples, maybe a husband and wife, or a couple of fiancés or so on. Okay, we can say that Latin saying nec tecum nec sine te, so that's neither with you nor without you. This is a frequent situation among people, okay, obviously, and he said married couples, for example, but it is also an image of, this is important, it is also an image of the interrelatedness of the elements within a single personality, particularly if the personality is in conflict with itself. So this relationship in which you can't be with the other, but you can't be without the other as well, is typical of relationships between two people, two persons, for example, but it is also typical of the relationship that we have amongst the elements inside ourselves, so inside a single personality, because that personality is often in conflict with itself, and that interior conflict makes those elements fight each other, okay, continuously. So that's the meaning, okay, of this interior fight, but this also, this complementary element of all these elements inside a single personality. Well, that's very interesting, okay, especially if we consider that the 20th century was the century of the analysis of the individual, the psychological side of the individual, and so this is particularly important if we consider that from a psychological point of view. Now, that's all for today. I hope that was interesting for you and I could give you a few hints or get something to think about. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave me a comment here below, and please, if you like my video, leave me a like or share if you believe that someone could be interested. I thank you so much for your support, for your great interest. There are always more and more people who write from many different countries all around the world. I'm really flattered, and I am glad that so many people are connected through the love and the interest for this great topic, which is the English literature. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and see you again very, very soon with English literature. Bye!